So, are you finding it harder to talk in a more relevant and meaningful way to your customers? Do you find yourself hiding away from the price question and think that whatever my customers will see, my competitors will see, therefore I won't post anything at all because that's the thing that I should be doing? And does the thought of being responsible for your own marketing and lead generation make you a bit wary about how you can stay relevant in a modern sales world? Well, I'm very fortunate today that the author of They Ask You Answer, one of the key sales and marketing texts for a modern and changed world, has joined me today for a little chat around how content can be supported across the sales process, what we can do to take a bit of ownership of it, and why building trust has changed and how that is reflected in the content that we do, and how we position ourselves for, I guess, sales success in a changed world. Marcus Sheridan, thank you so much for making time to be here with me today. For the benefit of those who aren't aware of the work that you do or who you are, if you could just please introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what do you do?
Well, today, what I mainly do is I get to travel around the world, speak to audiences, and help them become what is generally the most trusted voice in their space by teaching a framework that, of course, is called They Ask You Answer, and that's my book. And They Ask You Answer is an obsession with the way buyers, potential buyers, customers think, the questions they ask, what they fear, and it comes down to, as businesses, our willingness to address those questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns on our website, on social, etc. And the emotion that is induced if we do this, of course, is trust. And that's the battle we're all in. That's never going to go away, regardless of what happens with AI, regardless of what happens with the internet, with technology. Trust is going to be fundamental to your business. And so the framework of They Ask You Answer will show you exactly how to do that. And I've got an agency that teaches these companies on a global level now how to implement this framework in-house. And so we work with businesses, B2B and B2C, all over the world. It's quite fulfilling, quite enjoyable. I've got a great job, Rob.
Yeah, you certainly have. And you're helping a lot of people, I think, change their mindset and approach to modern sales and marketing, right? It's what some of the pushback we get, Marcus, has cut it off early in this conversation, is that content is more a B2C thing. It's more a marketing thing. To help us frame the conversation moving forward, is content just for B2C? He says as a loaded question.
Yeah. It's sad that we even have to address this, right, Rob? Because if you go back to what I just said a second ago, if I went to any B2B business, salesperson, leader, and I said, is trust fundamental to B2B sales? They'd say, oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, they love to use things like it's a very relationship-based sale, right? And so if that is the case, well, what are we doing to engender that trust? What are we doing to earn it? What are we doing to get it? So I think that's where it starts. And what we know too is that in the B2B space, the average buyer is roughly 70 to 80% through the buyer's journey before they reach out to a B2B company. So this means that they are 80% through, on average, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, that buying decision because they have vetted you to death. That subject, that thing that you sell, they've been researching. The question is, who they got their answers from? Who they learned from? Was it you? Was it a competitor? Was it a third-party site in your industry? Was it some bloke that has no idea what he's talking about? I mean, there's a myriad of possibilities who it could have been from. But I promise you this, it could have been from you if you're willing to address those things. Most people are not.
And it's becoming more and more as we experience in the companies we work with and individuals we speak to, it's becoming a decision to not do it. It's not even just an unknown anymore. It's, I see the stats, I see the research, I appreciate my buyers have changed, but I'm not going to change. And I think some of that, Marcus, just before we dive into what a topic I want to talk about that really jumped out of the book for me about assignment selling, is about the level of training that people get or don't get. And I'm going to just reference a little post here. Those that are watching this can see I've just shared a screen grab of a post that you put out recently. For those listening and can't see the screen, it's a post from Marcus about the majority of sales managers not actually doing any training, but focusing on, would you say, the wrong things in a modern world, Marcus? Or are these things relevant still, but they should be adjusting their time?
I
What's wrong
mean,
in the training space?
yeah, I mean, they've got some relevance, but ultimately, if I had to choose between, what was a lot of which is, it feels more like vanity metrics and busy work versus actually doing a world-class job of building a sales team. It's like, it doesn't matter if you review somebody's pipeline all day long. If they stink at asking questions, they're not going to be good at sales. That's just how it works. And so this is the issue. This is the issue we've got all these sales managers that, what are they doing? They're managing pipelines. They're, doing things like talking about where somebody is in the CRM and are using CRM correctly and all these things. But what are they not doing? They're not teaching them how to ask world-class discovery questions, how to handle any objection that comes their way, how to read the room perfectly, how to handle the dynamics of a group call when you're in that sales environment. The difference between selling on camera versus selling in person in the boardroom versus on a Zoom call. These skills are becoming a lost art. This is why, Rob, like, if you talk to most sales organizations and you ask a simple question, which is, do you do role play training at least once a month? Which ain't much. Once a month, 90% will say no. At once a month, Rob, I think the minimum bar of excellence should be once a week that you're doing role play trainings. But what happens is we don't. So instead of practicing on ourselves, who do we practice on? Our customers. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a bad idea. I don't want to practice on my customers. I want to practice with a team member, work out the kinks, refine my skills. That way, when I'm in that live situation with the prospect, it seems like I've already been there. I've already done it. So yeah, we've got a lot of issues, and that's why a manager doesn't necessarily make a great trainer. And it's true that sometimes a great trainer doesn't make a great manager per se, in terms of, you either tend to focus a lot more on, what would be interpersonal skills, or you focus a lot more on just straight metrics and data entry and actions like that. But I'm telling you what, I want the person that focuses on my team. I want them focused on interpersonal skills and training, grinding, working it out. That's what's going to lead to like a sales team that's unstoppable. Not the fact that they know how to use the CRM perfectly every time.
And why are they not focusing on those softer skills, I guess? Why are they not focusing on that? Is it because it's hard to quantify, do you think? Are they not? Are they trying to embed old habits? It's what we've always done, so we'll just get better at doing what we've always done. Where's the problem lie? Is it leadership, management, culture?
Well, I'm gonna say a few things that probably aren't popular, but it's just true. People don't like feedback these days. That's hard. So, there's a great book out there, Radical Candor. Radical candor means that you can be highly caring and highly direct at the same time. They don't have to be exclusive. And so when you create a culture of role plays, it means you're also creating a culture of feedback real time. So instead of waiting for some stupid review every 6 months or some dumb idea like that, now you're reviewing real time, all the time. How am I really doing? And you're with your peers. And guess what? Your peers are going to see you fail. I've had organizations tell me, yeah, this person just won't do a role play. Like, don't even ask them. I'm like, what kind of culture have you created here? This is not good. I have seen people that had a lot of trepidations that with training and practice became world class. So the moment you say, oh, it's okay that you don't do role plays because it makes you nervous, well, you're basically saying it's okay if we don't work through this struggle so that you come out a stronger person. That's just not the world of sales. That's not what we signed up for. That's not the profession. Now, if you don't want to be put on the line, choose a different job, and that's okay. That might be 100% fine. Be something else that's not public facing. But when the whole company's revenue is riding on your ability to hold a conversation and answer the right, make the right answers the right way and ask the right questions the right way, well, then you've lost your right to say, I'm just not going to practice this. I'm not going to do role plays.
You're choosing to avoid a situation you're uncomfortable with, right? Which I guess probably ties back a bit to the topic of content and building trust. And you mentioned about public facing. I guess in a digital sense, even though we're not in a face-to-face room, we are public facing. As an individual, we are public facing, if we say we don't use social media for business, have you got a profile? Yes. Then you do use social media for business. We try and position it in that respect, that whether you think you do or think you don't use social media, digital media, in your professional life, if you are on social and digital platforms, you're opening yourself up, and your customers will find you, won't they?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's no different than like somebody says, yeah, we're not going to talk about cost and price because then, it's public information. I'm like, so do you ever talk to your prospects about cost and price? Are they not in the public? Are they not able to speak with other people? So it's like, if you can say, I fundamentally believe that if you can say it and do say it to a prospect, why would you not say it to the rest of the world? Why would you not address it on the front end? Why would you not want to help essentially control that conversation, get in front of the issues instead of being reactive, be proactive? But oftentimes we don't choose to do that, Rob. And a lot of it goes back to a simple rule, golden rule: treat others as you yourself would want to be treated. I say people all the time, well, when you are on a website, for example, and you can't find cost and price information, how do you feel? I feel frustrated. What do? I leave. And you go where? I go somewhere until I find what I'm looking for. And that's why I call. Okay. And you do that with your customers. Now, you see, Marcus, you understand we're different. No, you're not. You ain't no different. You're not special. You're not a snowflake. Your business is rooted in trust, just like mine. Same psychology. You represent your buyer much more than you realize. So if you're using the internet a certain way, guess what? Your buyers are also using the internet probably that way. They've learned those same habits, those same tendencies. So stop seeing yourself in that, we're the exception to the standard rules of human psychology. You're not. It's funny. It's like we focus so much on the fact that we're different, we lose track of how we're all similar, and it hurts businesses. It actually hurts innovation and creativity. The companies I see doing the coolest things are the ones that aren't sitting there saying we're different than everybody else. They're saying actually our customers are pretty much like everybody else. And so we've got to find a way to generate more trust in anybody else. We got to be willing to say, teach, show, sell in a way that others aren't doing in our space. You can't do it the way mommy and daddy did it, and Grammy and Granddaddy did. Can't do it like that if you expect in 2023 and beyond to stay ahead of the marketplace.
No, it's fascinating listening to it, and I appreciate how frank you've been about it, because it's so hard to get the message across to people sometimes. You can show them, you can tell them, they can buy into it themselves, they can see the opportunities that digital bring, but they still shy away from it. And it really challenges me that they can't see it. And I think some of it comes down to fear. But if we can put it in that customer-facing way of trust, it is building trust. In a digital or physical sense, you can use content, you answer the questions sooner. The amount of times we hear they'll bring up price later in the sales process and we'll deal with it then. Or
yeah, think about that though. Think about that. Let's hang on that for a second, Rob. What's really sad is generally we don't answer the question of cost and price. And by the way, this is just one. issue. There's a million other subjects we could, but the cost and price is the one that's, especially for service-based businesses, it's the most volatile. It's the most debated in boardrooms. That's why we're talking about it, right? And so generally, we don't answer that question until they ask. And by that point, how many have we already lost? Again, we know the average customer is roughly 80% through the buyer's journey before they reach out to an organization. And so if any one of us rob, see, here's the biggest reason that we don't actually do it, Rob. We don't talk about these things because you can't count the number of people that, because you didn't talk about it, because you didn't address it, left, exited stage right, never filled out the form, never picked up the phone, never called you, never reached out to you. You can't measure that. You don't know. The fact is, if you knew, you would probably throw up in your mouth right now because it would make you sick to know how many people haven't reached out because they had a timidness about them. It's like, I don't know, this company's just not giving me what I want. Moving on. They're just not willing to answer my questions. Moving on. I don't feel totally comfortable yet. Moving on. That's what it literally, I don't exaggerate when I use these words. It would make you sick. And we can't measure it. We don't know that answer. If we knew, we'd all change.
In terms of trust, Marcus, what's missing? What is a modern sort of trust equation? Because we talk about trust in training. We talk about trust in developing skills to build trust, to be a position of authority, to inform our customers before they invite us to meet, because 80% of our decisions made before we even want to speak to a salesperson, if we want to speak to one at all. So we have to be that champion of trust. What is a trust equation? What's missing? Why has it changed? Has digital changed the way we develop trust, do you think? How can we, as sales professionals, as business development reps, how can we start to think about trust differently if we need to at all?
Yeah. Here's what's changed is the patience is less than it's ever been for today's buyer. And so they want it, and they want it now. They don't want it on your terms. Again, they don't want to wait until they're meeting with you face to face to ask you the friggin' question. They want to get a sense for it now, whatever it is. When it comes to trust, I always say you got to be willing to do three things. Got to be willing to talk about what others in your space, at least the majority, are not willing to talk about. You got to be willing to show, mainly through video, what others in your space are not willing to show. You got to be willing to sell in a way that others in your space are not willing to sell. When I meet with audiences, Rob, I'll always ask a question. Okay, how many of you in this room can honestly say that you talk about show and sell in a way that 95% of your industry just doesn't do? Almost nobody can raise their hand ever. Like 1 in a couple hundred people raise their hand. And so that's the litmus test right there. If you are not talking about showing and selling in ways that the majority of your space are not doing right now, you're not going to become that ultimate trusted voice, that trusted advisor, that trusted authority, whatever phrase you want to use. You're not going to become that. Okay. It doesn't matter how many advertising dollars you throw at it. You're not going to become the voice of trust. You might get phone calls, right? Anybody can get a phone call. Phone calls is not special. Anybody with a bottomless pit of money can get a crap ton of phone calls. Doesn't mean that you've earned their trust. And why would you spend all that money if you could earn their trust beforehand so that the money is much better spent? So you get a much higher return on your investment.
And I think you talk about willing to sell how others in your industry aren't prepared to sell. And I think finally we'll get onto the topic that we're going to discuss today about assignment selling. And I think, again, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's one of for me, one of the most important parts of the They Ask You Answer methodology, because a lot of people in the content or marketing space will talk about content for leads, content for awareness, content for generating inquiries. And what I found interesting or fascinating about the assignment selling principle is how content can support a buyer's journey across the sales process.
Yeah.
So for those that aren't aware with assignment selling as a principle, would you mind just giving us a sort of 30,000-foot view of what assignment selling is?
So, I discovered assignment selling around 2014-ish. I was looking at two groups of people on our company's website. Both had filled out a form and said, I want to get a quote. One group ended up buying, one group ended up not buying. So I said, okay, what's the difference, behaviorally speaking, between the ones that bought, got that pool, spent that money, versus the ones that did not, the ones that opted out? Okay, why did this one group trust us so much more than the other group? Ultimately, right? That's what we're saying. And I noticed the number 30 kept jumping out, and that number 30 represented total pages viewed. And here's what we found. If somebody read 30 or more pages of the website before the initial sales appointment, they would buy 80% of the time. If they didn't hit that magic number of 30, closing rates were about 25%. So they would literally go from 25 to 80% if they just consumed 30 or more pages of the website, pieces of content, before the initial sales appointment. So I said to myself, Rob, okay, this is a big deal. All I got to do is get people to that magic number, 30, before I get to their home, and I'm going to close a lot of friggin' deals. And that's exactly what happened. So by this point, I had moved out of my pool company. I still owned it, but I had other salespeople. Rob, I was skill-wise much better than my, the salespeople that replaced me. And before we started embracing assignment selling, I remember I had to go on to sell 75 pools one year. I went on about 210, 215 appointments. And once we integrated assignment selling, I had a guy one year, he sold about 100 pools, and he went on about 140 appointments. You do the math. Now you tell me who made more money, who had a better home life, who was happier. Yet, who was more skilled? Arguably, I was more skilled as a communicator, but I wasn't doing the things on the front end. And so that's because I didn't have all the content at that time. I couldn't have known these things. The good thing is because I was paying attention to the analytics. Now, I've used assignment selling in other businesses since, and I use it with my agency. I use it all the time. And so the point is, I've now trained this to companies all over the world. You can integrate content into the sales process. Most sales teams don't. Most sales teams aren't even aware of the content that's been produced by marketing. They're certainly not intentional about it. And then if they say they're doing it, they're not doing it the right way. Because there's a key way to do assignment selling that almost everybody screws up. And let me show you what most people do when it comes to content, Rob. And I'm going to show you what right looks like. Sound good? Okay. So what most people do, let's say that you're a prospect, Rob, you call me up and you're like, hey, Marcus, I'm checking out your website. Could you come out to my house and give me a quote for a swimming pool, let's say, just being hypothetical. And most people would say, yeah, sure, I'd love to come out to your house. Let me ask you, I'll ask you a couple questions. And hey, I'm going to send you a video before I come out. It'd be great if you could give it a look. And they think that was integrating content into the sales process. That's not integrating content into jack squat. You haven't done anything. You've done nothing. You've made a really weak invite to watch a video, right? So instead of doing that, Rob calls me up and says, hey, Marcus, I'm checking out your website. Could you come out to my house this Friday and give me a quote for a pool? I say, Rob, sure, I'd love to come out to your house. But you're getting ready to spend a lot of money. And if you're going to spend a lot of money, I know you don't want to make any mistakes. And so as to make sure you don't make any mistakes, here's what we're going to do. As we're talking on the phone right now, Rob, I'm going to send you two things via email that you're really going to appreciate. Now, the first thing I'm going to send you is a video that shows you the entire install process. So you're going to see what it's like when the pool shows up, goes in the ground, patio goes around it, clean up, the whole nine. This way, you're not going to say to me when I come out there Friday, Rob, Marcus, what does this process look like? You're already going to know. You're going to have seen it already. Now, by the way, that just saved me 30 minutes on the sales appointment. Okay. Now, the second thing I'm going to send you, Rob, is a buyer's guide, if you will. Now, this buyer's guide is great because it's going to answer a lot of questions about pools that you should know that you might not know yet. For example, Should you get a heater? What's the best type of heater? Should it be gas? Should it be electric? Should it heat and cool your water? Should it be solar? Should you get a cover? What's the best type of cover? Should it be mesh? Should it be solid? Should it be automatic? Should it be solar? Now, there's these questions and a lot more found there, Rob, in this guide. Now, this guide's a little bit long. It's about 30 pages, but I promise it'll be well worth your time. Rob, will you take the time to review these two things before our appointment on Friday? And of course, 90% of the time, the person says, sure, I'd love to. 10% of the time, they might push back. If they do, they're probably not a good fit anyway. Now, what's powerful about this is, does it hurt me to even ask them to do this? Of course not. Yet, do most people do this? No. You see, there's three main things I did there that make up effective assignment selling, Rob. The first thing is you got to clearly define the assignment. Okay. In this case, the assignment was two things. There's a video and there's a buyer's guide. Okay. Okay. So what's the assignment? Number two, why it matters. Okay. So notice I said to you things like, should you get a heater with the pool? What's the best type of heater? Right? Should it heat and cool the water? Because I wanted you thinking, I'm not quite sure the answer to this. I told you, if you don't know these things, you can make a mistake. So I want you to feel like there's a risk in not learning these things. There's risk. And hey, I need to lower my risk before I talk to this pool guy here, right? And the third thing, the third part, was getting a verbal confirmation that you would do it. We could call that win. So it's what, why, when. So in this case, I said, Rob, will you take the time to review these things before our appointment on Friday? Notice what I didn't say. I didn't say, so Rob, how does that sound to you? Because you could say, fine. And if you say, fine, have you promised to do anything at all? No, that's not selling. That's nothing. Sales is when you get verbal commitments and then written commitments on contracts. That's what sales is. And so I say to you, Rob, will you take the time to do these things before our appointment on Friday? You respond with yes. Now we have a verbal commitment. And oh, by the way, if you can create small instances of verbal commitments at the beginning of the sales process, they're much more likely to give you written commitments at the end.
And it's a great sales lesson. And I think I've got to ask, did you ever not go around to people's place because they hadn't done what they said they were going to do?
Well, that's a great question, Rob. You know, there is one thing that we added to our assignment selling at River Pools. Here's what we added. I would say to you, Rob, will you take the time to review these things before our appointment on Friday? You'd say, sure. And then I would say, some companies do this, some don't, but I think it's very powerful. I would say, great. Now, Friday morning, Rob, I'm going to give you a call just to confirm you took the time to do those things. Now, that's very powerful. That's very, very powerful. Then you say to yourself, what happens if you call them, Marcus, and they haven't done the thing? Well, I can recall when I first started doing this, and people hadn't done the thing, but they would say, no, but I still want you out. Please come out, Marcus. Yeah, I really want you to come out. I took the day off or whatever. They'd say whatever. I'd say, okay, I'll come out. And so I tracked for 6 months all the people that didn't do their homework. How many actually bought? Guess how many it was, Rob?
It's less than 50%.
None of them bought. Here's what I quickly learned. If somebody isn't willing to learn about the product or service you sell, it means they're basing their decision on one thing, which of course is price. That's it. And I'm always going to lose that game because we were always the most expensive company they're going to talk to, right? And so, as you might imagine, once I saw what was happening, I said, this is dumb. I'm not going to go out. And now, you might say, well, did people get pissed off about that? Well, I did have some people say, well, I can't believe you're not going to come out. I took the day off. I said, I appreciate the fact that you took the day off. But like I said, I don't want you to make any mistakes in this very important purchase. That's why I sent you this information. I also know that our time together is going to be much more valuable. We're going to get a lot more accomplished by you reviewing these things beforehand. So I've done this for you so that you don't make mistakes, because this is a one-shot deal to get this right. And so, Rob, if you don't have the time to become informed about these things, that's fine. It just means, though, that we're not the best fit for you. And what's interesting is, here's the response. Okay, this one was about 80-20. 20% would say, fine, screw you, which great. I lost nothing. I lost no time. I'm not going to go there and just have a price battle. But 80% would say, all right, Marcus, I'll do the homework. I'll do the work. And then I'll say, great. Now I'll call you that morning just to confirm you took the time to do those things.
There's a level of boldness and bravery around that approach, right? And I think you must get so much pushback about why we shouldn't or can't do this. Does that suit a certain type of organization with a certain number of leads where they can afford to almost have it as a filter? Okay, you didn't pass that.
Okay, yeah, I think to a degree, yes. To a degree, yes. So let's say the economy is in peril and you're struggling to get any leads at all. Well, then you might not have such a hard filter. Now, you're still going to do your assignment selling, but you might not make that a criteria by which you show up to the house or have the sales call. Okay. So you can gauge your business, your lead flow. That's how we did it at River Pools, because we have world-class lead flow because of the They Ask You Answer, right? So I had the ability to say, I want to work with those that really care about value. They're going to do their research. They're going to become well-informed. If they're not going to do that, they're not going to be a good fit for me. I just don't want to spend that time. I'm going to invest it elsewhere. Now, not everybody might, some listening to this might be the price, the low price, company, which if that's your business model, good luck to you, but this might not be a fit for you. I also want to point out here, Rob, that you said it requires boldness. Well, the rights of a teacher are greater than he or she who does not teach. And so the fact that I produce all this information, this great content that's so stinking helpful that nobody else does, it gives me the right to ask things of the prospect that others couldn't ask. That's very powerful. That's why you're called a thought leader, an authoritative voice, the voice of authority, the voice of trust. You can ask them to do things. You've earned it.
I think it's fascinating insight. It's really great to hear this application and the measure of success. And I think just for me, what I'm getting from this as well as benefits that might come from this as an approach. Do you find it helps cut off objections and time spent negotiating at that phase because they've already overcome their own objections, and in a way you're almost there to take the order? Does that help in that respect too? Yeah.
So this is a good point. If I came to most salespeople and I said, are there certain questions that if a prospect asks you, you can already tell they're just not ready to buy, or they're not going to be a qualified buyer, they're not going to be a good fit? Any salesperson that's been in the game for any period of time is going to say, oh yeah, no, there's certain questions. So let me give you an example. If back in the day, somebody said to me, when I got to the home, when I was still selling pools back in the day, if they said to me, Marcus, what, can you explain to me the difference between a concrete pool and a fiberglass pool? I knew they weren't going to buy probably that night. It was almost no chance. They weren't ready. They just weren't informed enough. By the time I get to their house, ideally, they know they want a fiberglass pool. Well, first of all, they know they're getting an in-ground pool. They know that they're leaning towards fiberglass, right? And they have a very strong sense as to what options, features they want. And they know what makes us different, i.e. what defines our value, with my company, River Pools, right? Which is, of course, where I started as a pool guy. So, this is why we spend a lot of time answering redundant questions in sales. Roughly 80% of the questions we get in the sales world are the same questions over and over again from each customer. Why do we keep answering the same questions over and over again? Do we like being the groundhog? No. It's like, why do you just want to spin the wheel, spin the wheel? It's like, we spend all this time teaching when we're face to face, when we want to spend that time selling. When I meet with a prospect face to face, I want to sell, baby. That's what I want to do. I shouldn't be answering, here's the difference between a concrete bowl and a fiberglass pool. You're wasting time. And so if you're listening to this right now, you need to understand what are the redundant questions that you're getting all the time. Because remember, the leads that you get and the conversations you have are as good or as bad as the messaging that brought them there. If you got crap leads, it ain't because your leads are naturally crappy. It's because you got bad messaging on your website. Leads are as good or as bad as the messaging that brought them there. Again, so that's why I can talk to some people in some industries and say, my internet leads are the best leads I get. Next person says, my internet lead stinks. What's the difference? Same industry, man. Messaging.
You know what? We get this so much in the training rooms that we're in. It's like if your messaging is that of 10% off, quick, cheapest wins and 50% discounts here, and you get to negotiate in your sales process and they go, hang on, can you just do it a bit cheaper, please? Because I came in and you were telling me how cheap you can do it, not how great or trustworthy or efficient or effective.
You're toast.
You're done. I was going to ask Marcus as we start to wrap up here about assignment selling, and thank you for the lesson around it. I think what some people might be wary of or unknowing about is where to start, because am I, as an individual, responsible for creating the content? How do I know which questions I need to start representing in this content? If I'm going to build this assignment selling process out, where do I start? It's a great concept, but what can I start to plug in to get going?
Well, what you need to do is you need to read the ask you answer to make to that's the first step. But in terms of what you're going to find in there, let me give you a few of the action items that you're going to find in there. What we just talked about, brainstorm the top 10 to 20 questions you get asked all the time. All right. I would suggest you start with at least 20. The next thing you say to yourself is, how many of these are addressed on my website right now through either text or video and are easy to find? Probably 5 or less. 5 or less. That's not good. All right. And these, when I say the top 20 questions, I'm not talking about questions they ask about you. Like, what are your hours? What's your warranty? What are your rates? I'm talking about the questions they ask about the service or the product when they're researching online. Like that's what's so interesting, right? That's what's going to make headway for you. And so you want to do that brainstorm and you want to address those. Now, if you're listening to this right now and you're saying to yourself, I just don't have time to produce this content. Well, let me just tell you, you don't have enough pain. Because when I was a pool guy back in the day and I was about to lose my business in 2008, 2009, I didn't have the time, but suddenly I found the time because I was going to file bankruptcy. And so because of that, we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And then I came up with this framework that we had done, which was the ask you answer, right? Of course. So point is, it's not about time. It's about priorities, about whether or not you get the vision. I can tell you too, this is going to be a rock in your shoe until you get rid of it. If you've ever had a rock in your shoe, how long did you walk before you just said, man, I got to get this thing out of here? I mean, you can't keep going. I don't care how hardcore you are. You're going to get rid of the rock in your shoe. So it's the same thing here. This need for the buyer to be informed and have their questions, worries, fears, issues, concerned addressed before they reach out to a company, that's only growing. It's only growing. And so you're going to have to get to a point where these things are addressed through content that you have produced, not your competitor and not just freaking AI. Even if you're using AI, you better put your tone and your voice and your personal stories in there. Otherwise, it's going to smell like a robot. And if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And I'm not interested in a duck, right? And so make sure you do it, you say it in a way that induces my trust because you're talking to me like a human being.
Absolutely. And Marcus, you're right. I mean, a lot of what we spoke about here, especially on the assignment side, is lifted from the They Ask You Answer book. And we've talked about such a small portion of it in our time today. And I think the sales lesson in this conversation is something that we should go back and watch again for those listening, go back and watch again for those watching it. But get the book. It is a key mindset shift. It's, call it what you will, it's effective. And I think if organizations, leadership need to grasp it, individuals need to grasp it and own it and take the message up if need be, rather than waiting for the message to come down, your buyers have changed. They Ask You Answer is a great methodology to help understand and adapt to that changing landscape. Marcus, if we need to connect, want to find out more, see more about the They Ask You Answer methodology and approach, how can we do that? Where can we connect with you and engage with your content?
Best place to find me, LinkedIn, folks. I'm good on LinkedIn. Put all my best stuff there. I'm going to give you 5 to 7 really valuable posts a week. So connect with me there. You can reach out to me personally. Easy email to remember, marcus@marcussheridan.com, marcus@marcussheridan.com. Of course, you should be following Rob on LinkedIn too, because he's a great follow as well. I follow Rob. And Rob, I appreciate you having me on the podcast today. I think you're doing great. And, I think you really get it. And the people that work with you are lucky to work with you.
That's very kind of you to say, Marcus. And listen, we keep fighting the good fight, right? And someday they'll listen.
Amen to that, brother.
They're going to get left behind if not. Marcus, thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been a pleasure. Some great insights. And you take care, go steady, and we'll see you again soon.
My pleasure.